I am really excited about this one. It was just the second to last video I did, but for me, it's been a while since I last spun the wheel. So I'm excited about what we'll get this time around. So far, we have platinumed a game I'd wanted to play in forever with Spiritfarer and a hidden gem in Dragon's Tavernier. So, without further ado, let's spin the wheel. Well, ain't this thematically accurate? With the recent release of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it seems only fitting that the wheel gave us Final Fantasy VII Remake. I am super excited about this one. I've actually never played a Final Fantasy game before. I started a bit with 13-2 back on the PlayStation 3, but never got far as I realized it was a sequel and never bought the first one. So my expectations and hopes are high for this one. It got almost universally praised when it released. And this should be a great journey for us. This game, if you didn't already know, was developed by and published by Square Enix in 2020 for the PlayStation 4 and later released on the PlayStation 5 in 2021. We play as Cloud, an ex-soldier turned mercenary, as we are hired by a group named Avalanche to help destroy a Mako reactor. A reactor that extracts the life force of the world. So, in other words, we are eco-terrorists. Taking a look at the journey, we should have a fairly simple time. With a few difficult specific trophies and a trophy tied to multiple playthroughs, this might take a while to finish, but it should be overall pretty great. I should also mention that we are playing the PlayStation 4 version of the game, as that was the version I got when I cloud streamed the game. Why did I cloud stream the game, you might ask? Well, I'll let Pass MPO explain that one. Streaming on the PlayStation Plus app as my Elgato decided to commit Sudoku. Thank you, Pass MPO. So, even though I have the ability to play the PlayStation 5 version, we are playing the PlayStation 4 version. Meaning a bit worse graphics and most likely no intermission DLC at the end. With that in mind, the game immediately throws us into a battle as we arrive at the Mako 1 reactor, with the Cloud looking incredibly anime. He's so anime. Defeating the Shinra grunts start us off with our first trophy. Easy, it's warming up. This game uses real-time action combat, instead of the turn-based combat the original was based on. It still has remnants of that system, with ability to perform actions and spells that slows down time, allowing for more thoughtful targeting and decision making. Which I really liked, since I'm usually a big fan of turn-based combat, if it's done correctly. This is the opening level, and as such, serves as a way of teaching us all the basics, such as staggering an enemy and exploiting the weakness of an enemy.
Keep it up. Let's kick it up a notch.
Cloud isn't going on this journey alone though. Throughout the game, we will have a rotating cast of teammates to help us out. In this mission, we are joined by Barrett, the leader of this group of Avalanche members. With him by our side, we breeze through the rest of the chapter, fight the safety mechanism guarding the reactor core, get screwed over by the government, and finish the first out of 18 chapters. Chapter 2 just really comes and goes without anything of note really happening. It introduces some fairly important characters in Aerith and Sephiroth, and it's also here I notice just the attention to details the developers have had when making this game. Because as we equip more materia to our weapons, they are equipped on the actual weapon and we can see it in game. And it's just such a cool little detail, but it adds so much to the game. Besides that, there isn't really a lot to say about this one trophy wise, and it's over fairly quickly. Chapter 3 is where the game opens up a bit. It is one of 4 very open-ended chapters, meaning that instead of it just being a linear path to the finish line, we get the ability to here do some side quests and smell the roses, as it were. We start off by arriving in the Sector 7 slums, the place where this group of Avalanche members has their headquarters, and where we are also introduced to Tifa for the first time. Tifa and Cloud are childhood friends, but they haven't really seen each other in forever since Cloud joined up with the military. A touching reunion turns into us moving into an apartment here in the slums. And to introduce ourselves to the neighborhood, we decide to take on some merc work and to help out the neighborhood watch. Which just turns out to be Wedge and Bridge that we met in the first chapter as part of Avalanche. Tifa joins us for this chapter, and with her in our party, we venture out to hunt some beasts, where Tifa gets grappled and we free her for a very easy trophy.
It's over.
Coming back into town, we are introduced to some shopkeepers and to Chadley. Chadley will be important for multiple trophies in this journey, as he's responsible for developing materia based on the battle intel we gather. Materia is what allows us to use magic or get various buff. Battle intel can be to assess enemies, stagger them, use their weaknesses, or other activities we will get back to. For now, all you need to know is that we need to complete all the battle intel for a trophy. Seeing as we did such a great work for the watch earlier, they want us to do more, and a whole bunch of side quests opens up to us. It should be noted that the side quests are tied to the chapter, so I had to remember to do them all before progressing too far in the chapter. And luckily the game tells you when that point is, so at least that's nice of them. I find it fitting that the first quest the tough and stoic Cloud completes is to find 3 cats for a little girl. He's just really a big softie.
Thank you!
Going around doing side quests quickly makes it so that we level up one of our materia orbs.
That's a win!
And max out a weapon affinity. Both of the trophies are the beginning of a long list of requirements for some later trophies, so it's good to get a head start on them here. After completing all the side quests of this chapter, Tifa wants to talk with us. This is a discovery quest and gives us a little heart-to-heart, if you will. At some point here we plan outfits for a supposed date later on. The options you pick here will be important for later. For now, I answer exotic and moved on. Moving on introduces us to Johnny for the first time. A big time airhead, but he's got the heart in the right place. He's captured by Shinra, and since we know he can't keep his trap shut, we go in to rescue him and tell him to get out of town. On our way back, we hear some funky tunes from a store and decide to pick up a CD. This is in fact the 3rd music disc we pick up, and we need all 31 of them at some point, but for now, we have started our music collection.
You like it? You feeling it? Have a copy.
As a very eventful day comes to a close, we talk some more with Tifa before being left out of the Avalanche Club meeting. A bummer, I know, right? Deciding to kill some time, waiting for them, we test our dart skills. We're a bit rusty, but after a couple of attempts, we rise up to the top of the leaderboard. Avalanche Club meeting comes to a close. We are currently out of the band, and so does this long and eventful chapter come to a close. One thing I don't really want to do with this video is focus too much on the story. Not because it's bad or anything like that. No, it's actually the opposite. It's really, really good. And I think everyone should experience this one. I also don't want to make a Dragonstar Vanir situation again, because that was tiresome to make. So I try to avoid too much details about the story and leave you with the fact that it is really good and it should be experienced and should be played. I say this because there isn't a lot to be said about Chapter 4, besides the fact I missed a trophy that we'll have to get back to later. Chapter 3 ended with Jesse giving us a summoning materia. And in the fight at the end of this chapter, we get the ability to use it for the first time and summon Ifrit. And the first of plenty summons. And just as quickly as it started, Chapter 4 is over. And so is Chapter 5, and Cloud is back in the team, and we're off to another Mako reactor. Chapter 6 is navigating a maze-like level design, with plenty of backtracking and detours because of the poor maintenance of this area done by Shinra. On one of these detours we pass some giant fans and notice that one of them are broken, and behind one of the propellers is a weird looking materia. After having rerouted some power to this area, we can activate a maintenance mode for the propeller, which opens up the path to said propeller. One small problem is that this area is filled with monsters, and we are on a timer. The first time we try to get through, we face some resistance from the leader of the beasts, and miss our opening. Luckily, we can try this again, and have an easier time of it this time around, and our reward turns out to be another summoning materia for the iconic Chocobo and Moogle, and more importantly, another trophy. Some more rerouting of power later, and we arrive at the Mako reactor. Chapter 7 leads us around the Mako reactor as Shinra tries to stop us. The cool thing about this one is that we can somewhat customize the end of the chapter boss, as we can reroute different parts being sent to the robot to be disposed of instead. Even cooler is that towards the end of the chapter we can unlock a high security gate to keep those parts for ourselves. It mostly ends up being consumables and some other things I didn't actually use, but it's a cool idea nonetheless. After a level puzzle, we get to reap what we sowed before going on to our biggest challenge yet. This entire chapter builds up to this chapter boss, and it does not disappoint. This is where the difficulty of the game ramps up, and I, for the first time, had to think about what materials I used and the layout of my team. A hard-fought win with Barrett with lightning materia as the MVP sees us emerge victorious after a few attempts. Chapter 8 is another one of those open-ended chapters, and the chapter where we are formally introduced to Arif, whom we briefly saw in Chapter 2. And you know what these open-ended chapters mean? Plenty of trophies. We're now in the Sector 5 slums, and wouldn't you know that Chadley has taken a trip to this part of Midgard as well. After turning in some valuable battle intel, he introduces a new hypothesis. He can create summoning materia. But in order to do that, he needs data about them, which is why he has created a battle simulation where we can test our mantle against these deity-like beings. For now, he has one challenge for us, the ever so beautiful Shiva. Being as stubborn as I am, I go to town trying to beat her with just Cloud in my party. I could have waited until I had Arif back in my party, but I am an impatient man and wanted this done. It took a few attempts more than it probably needed to take, but I finally found the winning strategy, and I could get my first summon materia from the VR simulation, and of course the trophy for doing it.
Let's go.
As Arif joins our party again, we see the flowers we picked earlier in the chapter was used to create a beautiful mural on the orphanage. As Arif joins us, the kids from the orphanage comes rushing to us as a few of the kids are in trouble. After helping them, we have gained the trust of the kids and are trusted to help the rest of the people in the slums. Seeing as we are a nice mercenary, we do exactly that and start doing side quests. At some point, we are invited to take part in the biggest competitions in the slums, Whack-a-Box. A grueling challenge all about breaking boxes. A test of intelligence, strength and dexterity, and if you have chosen the right weapon for the job. I tried using the bat for a while, which had a devastating hard-hitting attack, but I couldn't manage to become number 1 using this strategy. I instead went on to equip the iron blade that I bought back in Chapter 3 and utilized the triple slash ability. It had to great effect, whacking boxes like there was no tomorrow, to be crowned the Great Annihilator. Before going on to complete the rest of the side quests of this chapter, I decided to stay behind and play Whack-A-Box a little bit more. Because when you play the game, you get a participation reward no matter what, which is a Moogle medal, which can be used in the Moogle store that was unlocked as part of this side quest chain. Inside the Moogle store, you can buy different manuscripts for the different characters in the game. These manuscripts gives you SP, which can be used to upgrade the weapons in the game. So in order to be as powerful as possible going forward, I decided to go and get those manuscripts. I probably could have done this later. I didn't know at the time I could, but I could have gotten these later. But I instead spent 30 minutes just standing still and let the game play itself. Quality gameplay right there. All this whacking has been fun, but there was still a few side quests left. One of them introduced a character known as the Angel of the Slums. A Robin Hood-esque character for the people of Midgar. A nosy reporter is inquiring about this character, and as we investigate for him, we are almost taken out from one of her contraptions. This doesn't slow down the journalist, it rather had the opposite reaction. Nothing more happens as of now, but just wanted to introduce the concept for now. A day of festive questing comes to an end, and so does Chapter 8. And wouldn't you know, Chapter 9 ends up being an open-ended chapter as well. And it starts really cool, as it starts immediately after Chapter 8 ends. No loading screens, no cutscenes, just a continuous transition from gameplay to gameplay. Well, that was a little cutscene, but okay, fair, you got me there. You got me there, game. You have to go through the Sector 6 slums in order to reach Sector 7 again. And on our journey, we are introduced to the most boppin' soundtrack of the game so far. I mean, just listen to these jazzy tunes.
I got you now.
After a bit of fighting and puzzling, we almost reach Sector 7 when we see Tifa drive towards the wall market, the underbelly of Midgar. Seeing as we can't let Tifa fend for herself, we follow on, and so continues the longest chapter of this game. In order to understand what is going on and to understand some of the trophies, I will talk a bit about the story, so I'm just sorry about that one. But we need to get to Don Corneo, the mafia boss of Wall Market. And in order to do so, we need the approval of one of the trio. The trio is the 3 people working directly under Don Corneo. That's the job of finding candidates for Don Corneo's next plaything. Yes, it is as icky as it sounds. Tifa has already been chosen by a man named Sam, and is in Don Corneo's mansion. Now we need Aerith to get there as well. As we enter the city, we run into Johnny again. He has been living here since he departed Sector 7 in Chapter 3, and we continue to run through the city. We are soon enough introduced to Madame M, as she chases Johnny out of her massage parlor. She is one of the trio, and after paying for the luxury hand massage that leaves Cloud a bit too excited, I would say, she agrees to endorse Aerith. Just one small caveat, as we need to win the Colosseum fight in order to pay for the dress. We make short work of the Colosseum until a dirty trick is called, and we end up having to fight the freaking house? A cool but easy fight. For now. As we now have paid for the dress, we have some time to kill. And what better way to do that than by, yep, you guessed it, doing side quests. One of them takes us to the gym, where we shut up the gym bros by beating them in squat competitions. They were actually really nice people, and Cloud is a squatting god.
You got it, Jules!
We also take a trip back to the Colosseum to do some extra fights for another trophy.
Let's go.
As we are about to return to Madame M after our side quest escapades, Johnny comes running up and is frantic about Tifa being in trouble. He leads us back to the mansion, and as we still can't get in without the endorsement, we return and is met by Aerith in the most beautiful red dress. I mean, just wow. She has a plan of her own though, because our fighting has caught the eye of the final trio member, and he wants to see us. He agrees to meet Cloud, but before he will help us, we have to dance with him. Not gonna lie, I did not expect this game to turn into a rhythm game, yet here we are. It was a bit confusing at times, because the camera makes this a somewhat dizzying experience, but talent triumphs dizziness, and we end up wowing him so much, he rewards us with a trophy. He also rewards us with a very nice dress, and we get our trophy for seeing 3 bridal dresses. The one Tifa came riding in with was determined by what we said at the end of chapter 3. The one Aerith wears is determined by how many quests we complete in chapter 8. And the one Cloud gets is determined by what quests we do in this chapter. Oh, and did I mention that there are 9 dresses in this game? Yeah, this won't be the last you see of this chapter. It will, however, be the last you see of this chapter, for now. And since we don't get any other trophies, we also finish up chapter 10, chapter 11, where we also miss getting a weapon, more on that a bit later, chapter 12 Sage, and chapter 13, before ending up at the final open-ended chapter of the game, chapter 14. This is the final preparation of the game. Aerith has been taken by Shinra during these last chapters, and we need to get her back. This is a huge chapter, bigger than that of chapter 9, at least when you count the side quests. It combines the Sector 5 slums, Sector 6 slums, and Wall Market all into one big area. It continues side quests from both chapter 8 and 9, and has some really lengthy side quests to boot. So, let's go on. One of the first things we do is talk to the kids in Sector 5, and is invited to take part in the Extreme Whack-A-Box Challenge. More boxes, more carnage, more stress. Well, we have better gear now, better abilities, and more damage, making it so we can make quick work of the harder version of the competition. We run into Chadley again, and he has a few more VR missions for us. As I tackle those, I fight and refight the fat chocobo fight a couple of times until I'm finally able to use Tifa's ability to increase the stag gauge to do 300% damage, which took forever. And speaking of forever, we're back with the gym bros. This time they want to challenge Tifa to do a pull-up competition, a challenge that absolutely fucked with my brain. The patterns you have to press with the speed and precision needed to defeat all 3 of them was just too much for me. I struggled for a long time with the hardest challenge. But at some point I managed to get my brain to do the correct pattern, and finally Tifa became a peeress of pull-ups. After calming some chocobos, getting medicine for the citizen of Sector 5, and helping Johnny regain his stolen money, we were ready to go after Aerith. But before we do,
I have to finish the story.
The Angel of the Slums tasks us with getting the stash of Don Corneo that is hidden around various areas in order to help the survivors of Sector 7. And after robbing him blind, we get the final approval of the Angel and became a guardian ourselves. And our time in the slums are over. It's time to take the fight to Shinra once again and rescue Aerith. On our way to rescue her though is chapter 15 and chapter 16. Now only 2 chapters remain. First playthrough is so close to done, I can almost taste it. Chapter 17, the chapter that would never end. There was 3, I kid you not, 3 end of chapter bosses here. 5 bosses in total in the entire chapter. Each and every single one of the final 3 bosses I thought was gonna be the end. But it just kept on going. And I'm not gonna lie, this chapter was pretty darn fun. We end up using all characters in some capacity. And during this and the last chapter, end up picking up the final weapons for our characters. Or I say that, but like I mentioned earlier, I missed a very easy to miss weapon in chapter 11 that we will have to go and get in hard mode instead. As the third and final boss is finally defeated, chapter 17 is cleared. And we're on to the final chapter. It starts off with a high-speed chase and a vehicle battle that was legitimately tough before I got the hang of the controls. And if you know anything about the game, you know what is coming. A date with destiny. An opportunity to change the future. A showdown with the man that has haunted us this entire journey. The final boss. No, I'm not talking about The Rock. I am talking about Sephiroth. The iconic one-winged angel stands between us and a trophy. And for that, he has to go down. And with only dying once to the final boss, we managed to take him out in a really good final boss fight. And chapter 18 and the game is finished. Even though the game is completed and we're only missing 12 trophies for the plat, the end is not in sight. Here, the fun stopped. It practically disappeared. I've said it before, and I will say it a million times over again. I hate forced second playthroughs. Especially those that force me to play through the game without altering the game in any significant way, or just allows me to speedrun through the game feeling like a god. This second playthrough will have positives. And we will get to those, but they will be very few and very far between. Before starting hard mode, however, I decided to run through chapter 3, 8 and 9 on the easiest difficulty to get the worst dresses in the game by not doing side quests in any of those chapters. Making it so I now had seen 6 out of the 9 dresses. In addition to getting the dresses, I picked up the music disc I missed by perfecting the dancing tutorial before the Andrea dance. And I also took a trip to chapter 4 through the chapter select and did the bike minigame there without losing too much health to win Jess's admiration.
You passed the test.
And so it begins, the hard mode playthrough. This playthrough combines enemies dealing more damage, not being able to use items, MP not being restored at resting spots, making my ability to cast spells limited, and all this ends up being a recipe for a tedious and repetitive playthrough. Skipping cutscenes left, right and center, defeating enemies in a slow manner and utilizing very specific setups. I started to slowly make progress. But I got stumped by the first boss in the game. It took me down repeatedly, and when I lost Cloud, who held the revival materia, well, then Barrett was stuck in a state where he had to self-heal and was unable to deal enough damage to negate the boss's healing move. Yeah, not off to a great start, are we? And this is the tale. During this tedious playthrough, I did however eventually get to level 50, meaning max level in the game.
I can do this all night!
Finally, I got to some of the good stuff about hard mode. Chapter 9. On our way to this chapter, I made sure to pick the final dialogue option for Tifa in chapter 3, and only finished 5 out of the 6 side quests in chapter 8 to make sure I got everything ready for the end of this chapter. We're back in Wall Market, and remember the house we had to fight earlier? Yeah, it is leveled up. It now throws everything at you, including the kitchen sink. And with limited healing and MP, this was a real tough fight, and I loved every second of it. Finally, I needed to actually strategize and mix and match my materia setup. I'd done a bit of it already, but not to this degree, and the fight was fundamentally different here, with additional enemies and attacks being thrown at me that I had not seen in the first playthrough. I mean, it even threw those goddamn tonberries at me. For the love of Christ, those are death incarnate. I love this. This is what makes this hard mode fun. Really testing the player to see how far we have come. Unfortunately, it does negate the fact that about 90% of this playthrough is doing the exact same shit I had already done over again. After many close attempts, I finally took down this monstrosity and could reap the rewards. First, I made sure to get the other of the 2 side quest sets available in this chapter. One of those side quests involved Johnny, and this was the final Johnny related event I hadn't seen, which actually was a pretty decent side quest, even though it was practically a very long fetch quest.
Couldn't agree more. Should probably go.
I then went back to the arena to fight a challenge of Sam's choosing to beat the final side quest in the game, before doing the Andrea dance for the 3rd and final time to get the final bridal dress. 9 dresses obtained, baby. 9 chapters completed. 9 more remains. In order to speed up the process a bit, I decided to skip over to chapter 17, where the hardest challenge of the game lies waiting. But in order to unlock that, I had to play chapter 9 for the 4th time, because I missed out on doing a combat challenge as Erfter by progressing too far in the chapter last time. Beating the hardest challenge will give me an item that would drastically speed up the remaining chapters. Close to the beginning of the chapter, Chadley has now appeared, and he has brought a combat simulator for us to try. There are 3 big battles that we need to prepare for here, each fight giving us a trophy. The first one is the final VR challenge against Bahamut. The final summon is a beast, equipped with hard-hitting magic attacks and an insta-kill move that it counts down to. It is this final countdown move that ended up being a problem for me. Took me out a couple of times, but I equipped a few revival earrings that could bring me back, and I upgraded my weapons to give me the skill that would bring me back if I died as well. I also equipped some healing and revival material to make sure I could withstand the attacks, and eventually I managed to bring it down. Now I could cash in on the final battle intel and gain the most powerful summon in the game. That brings us to the combat simulator, where I had to grind through plenty of battle scenarios. I also took the time to grind material levels on one of these missions. I was finally ready to take on the penultimate challenge, the Monsters of Legends, where at the end of the gauntlet lies the fight against Malboro. And honestly, the biggest hurdle of this challenge was Death Incarnate itself, Tonberry. They ended up wiping the floor with me in the first 2 attempts before I figured out how to deal with them. Fire absorbing materia is the saving grace in this challenge, negating most of the damage from the bomb enemies. The other enemies just require patience and a bit of healing materia to get through, and wasn't really a struggle. The Malboro itself was mostly a damage sponge, but didn't really pose much of a threat otherwise. I did however have to make sure to get hit by the bad breath attack to get the enemy skill associated with it, so that I could get close to the trophy for getting all enemy skills. But with the Malboro down, only pride and joy remains. And pride and joy is a gauntlet unlike any other. A rematch against all VR mission summons. I took a few hours to grind up the materials I had to an acceptable level, yes, I said hours, and gave it a go. And I died against the first fight against Shiva. It took a bit more strategizing, equipped myself with fire absorbing materials, having Ifrit as a summon to deal with Shiva, and plenty of healing, revival, HP up and MP up materials to tank my way through the challenge. And after I got through Shiva by using Ifrit, there wasn't really any troubles. Fat Chocobo is a damage sponge, but doesn't really deal a lot of damage. Leviathan went down to the same strategy as before by using barrier materia with Magnify to make sure we negate the tidal wave attack, and Bahamut brought Ifrit to the fight, but my fire absorbing materia negates and actually heals me during the fight. It felt like Bahamut had less health this time around, and it went down fairly quickly. Though it did connect with the insta-kill, but luckily I hadn't died yet up until this point and was brought back with 1 HP and managed to heal myself up from there. So now only the Pride and Joy prototype remains. The fire attack it wields were negated by the fire absorbing materia, and by steadily switching between the characters to spread the damage evenly, it went down surprisingly easily. As soon as I got past Shiva, I didn't die once in this challenge. And honestly, I'm super proud of that. The reward for this is a heartfelt heart-to-heart with Chadley. And also the legendary Gotterdamung, an item that allows us to start every battle with full limit break gauge, allowing us to use cross slash with Cloud or the refocus limit break at the beginning of every fight to speed up all the remaining fights in this game, both against normal enemies and bosses. With what is explained as the hardest challenge of the game finished, I return back to chapter 10 to grind my way through the remaining chapters. In chapter 14, I fortunately didn't have to complete any side quests, but I had a few trophies to pick up here. First was to pick up the final music disc in the game, and the other was to pick up the final enemy skill against the phantoms in the graveyard. I got the skill and the trophy, before quickly losing the skill because I lost the fight. Still, kept the trophy though, and that's all that matters in my eyes. Our final stop before the end of the game is chapter 16, which has the funniest gag I have seen in a video game in a long time. At one point, we have to get to floor 59 to gain access to the highest floors of the Shinra building. There are two ways of doing this. One is to take the elevators. It's a sensible choice, but it leads to a couple of fights. The other is to take the stairs. And the game actually forces you to walk up all these floors, with all characters complaining in various ways. Absolutely peak comedy gold. Anyways, we now make it to chapter 17. I should have had the trophy for getting all the weapon abilities a long time ago at this point. But during the first playthrough, I forgot to steal the bladed staff from the chapter boss in chapter 11. This time I remembered to do that, and when I got to chapter 17, where Aerith was playable once again, I finally got all the weapon abilities.
How about you back off?
And that leaves one. Chapter 17 was grueling, as it still contains 5 bosses, meaning that MP management is key here. Let me just ask, what the heck? The final boss fight comes right after another, with a cutscene between them. I was going on autopilot and had to restart the match. And before I knew what had happened, I was right before the first fight in this sequence, because I had clicked start before the first fight instead of start before the last battle. This made me angry. This just made me angry. It added more time, and I really didn't need that. A rematch with Sephiroth is all that stands between me and the Platinum, and he has also most certainly leveled up. Brutal attacks and a higher frequency of attacks made for a tough challenge. After having beaten the boss before this one, I was a bit low on resources, and it took a couple of attempts before I managed to structure my materia correct, to have all the healing I needed. The strategy was easy. Cloud would use counter stance on Sephiroth. Tifa and Aerith would mostly focus on healing Cloud and attacking when opportunity would show itself. I died only twice to the boss, and I both saw and crossed the finish line. Final Fantasy VII Remake is beaten. I have turned into a hardened veteran, and I am the master of fate. A long 72-hour journey finally comes to an end, and this is a mixed bag if I ever saw one. On one hand, I love this game. On the other, I hate the platinum. For me, this is a 9 out of 10 game. The gameplay, the story, the visuals, and not to mention the music. Everything is masterfully crafted. A bit tedious quest and level design stops this from being as close to a perfect game as you will get. So the first 40 hours of this game was magical. But like I said, it took me 72 hours to get this platinum. The 32 hours after the first credits rolled was awful, for the most part. I have said my piece earlier, and I will emphasize that forced New Game Plus runs is one of the things I dislike most in trophy hunting. Only beaten by online trophies in single player games. I also really like hard modes, because they usually tend to be the best way to engage with all the gameplay systems. Just look at The Witcher 3 for instance. This combo of hard mode only unlocking in New Game Plus though, is not something I am a fan of. Because when I beat a game, I want to be done with it. You have seen my backlog. It's too big to replay games where the experience is the exact same as the first one, only slower. I did mention though there are positives. There are 3 of them in the second playthrough. The house fight in chapter 9, the Pride and Joy prototype gauntlet, and all of chapter 18 was better in hard mode. Everything else is tedious, boring, and repetitive. But I couldn't turn off my brain like I would for endless repetitive collectibles for instance. Because hard mode required focus and effort to not die. And I was so over this game at the end. So my completion rating of this game is a 5 out of 10. Play this game. Please play this game. It's a masterpiece. And as a first time Final Fantasy player, I love this game. The world and the story, the music, everything. And I will be back to play other Final Fantasy games. I'm a big fan now. The Platinum, however, was one of my least favorites in my collection. It will probably be a while before I venture into Rebirth, because I suspect that the journey will be mostly the same there. And there you have it. Do you agree or disagree with my statement of the game? Please leave them in the comments below. And if you want to see me complete another classic, then you can see how I got the platinum for Ratchet & Clank 2 going commando on the screen right now. And I will see you guys in the next one. Remember I love you guys, and bye.